Zarathek moved through the shadows of the massive space station like liquid death. Her four arms flowed in perfect harmony, each hand gripping a different weapon. The plasma blade in her upper right hand hummed softly, its purple glow barely visible in the dim corridors. Her lower left hand held a neural disruptor, while the other two hands carried throwing knives that could pierce military-grade armor. She had been hunting for 3 days now, tracking her target through the maze of tunnels and chambers that made up Nexus Station. The target was a Valerian diplomat who had stolen classified military data about her people's defensive positions. The theft could cost millions of lives if the information reached enemy hands. The Veltar assassin had never failed a mission. In her 12 years of active duty, she had eliminated over 200 targets across 40 different star systems. Her people called her the Shadow Walker, and even seasoned warriors whispered her name with respect and fear. She could move faster than most beings could think, and her reflexes were enhanced by genetic modifications that made her reaction time nearly instantaneous. The station around her buzzed with activity. Nexus Station served as a neutral trading post where dozens of different alien species conducted business. The main corridors were filled with merchants hawking exotic goods, travelers seeking passage to distant worlds, and diplomats negotiating trade agreements. But Zarathek moved through the maintenance tunnels and service corridors, invisible to the crowds above. She had studied the station's layout for weeks before arriving. Every vent shaft, every emergency exit, every security checkpoint was mapped in her mind. She knew which guards changed shifts when, which cameras had blind spots, and which routes would allow her to reach her target without being detected. The Valerian diplomat was staying in the diplomatic quarter, a heavily secured section of the station reserved for high-ranking officials. But security meant nothing to Zarathek. She had already bypassed 3 different alarm systems and disabled 4 security drones without anyone noticing. As she climbed through a ventilation shaft toward the diplomatic quarter, she reviewed what she knew about her target. Ambassador Kethvan was a seasoned politician with a reputation for cunning and ruthlessness. He had somehow gained access to the Veltar military database and stolen battle plans that detailed defensive strategies for their core worlds. If those plans reached the hegemony forces, they could punch through Veltar defenses and reach their homeworld within weeks. The theft had been discovered too late to change the defensive positions. The only way to protect her people was to ensure the stolen data never reached its destination. That meant eliminating the ambassador before he could transmit the information or deliver it in person. Zarathek reached a grate that opened into a corridor near the diplomatic quarter. She listened carefully, her enhanced hearing picking up the footsteps of a security patrol passing by. She waited until the sounds faded before carefully removing the grate and slipping into the corridor. The diplomatic quarter was designed to impress visitors with its gleaming walls and artistic displays representing dozens of different cultures. Zarathek ignored the decorations and focused on the security measures. Sensor arrays tracked movement throughout the area, but she had already hacked into the system and created false readings that would mask her presence. She moved from shadow to shadow, her dark clothing and natural skin coloration making her nearly invisible against the darker sections of the walls. Her breathing was controlled and silent, each step carefully placed to avoid making any sound. The ambassador's quarters were on the 15th level of the diplomatic section. Zarathek took the service elevator, having already disabled its monitoring systems. As the elevator rose, she prepared her weapons and reviewed her plan of attack. She would enter through the ambassador's private balcony, which overlooked one of the station's artificial gardens. The balcony door had a standard security lock that she could bypass in seconds. Once inside, she would locate the ambassador and eliminate him quickly and quietly. Then, she would search for the stolen data and either retrieve it or ensure it was destroyed. The elevator reached the 15th level, and Zarathek stepped out into another dimly lit service corridor. She could feel her heart rate increasing slightly as the moment of action approached, but her training kept her movements calm and precise. She reached the maintenance access that led to the balcony area and began picking the lock. The mechanism was more complex than she had expected, requiring nearly 3 minutes to bypass. As she worked, She monitored the corridor behind her for any signs of discovery. Finally, the lock clicked open, and she slipped through the access door onto a narrow maintenance walkway that ran along the outer hull of the station. The artificial gravity here was lighter, and she had to adjust her movements to avoid floating away from the walkway. She could see the ambassador's balcony 30 meters ahead. The doors were closed, but she could detect the heat signature of someone moving around inside the quarters. Her target was home. Zarathek reached the balcony and examined the security lock on the door. It was a standard diplomatic-grade system, designed more for privacy than security. She attached a small device to the lock mechanism and waited while it analyzed and bypassed the security protocols. The door clicked softly, and she eased it open just enough to slip inside. The ambassador's quarters were luxurious by station standards, with expensive furniture and artwork from various worlds. Soft lighting created a warm atmosphere, and she could hear the sound of running water coming from what was probably a bathroom. Perfect. The ambassador was distracted and vulnerable. She moved through the main room, checking each corner for additional security measures or hidden guards. The quarters appeared to be empty except for her target. She approached the bathroom door, plasma blade ready in her upper hand. The sound of running water stopped. Footsteps approached the door from the other side. Zarathek pressed herself against the wall beside the doorway, all four arms positioned for a coordinated strike. The ambassador would emerge, and she would end this mission in seconds. The door opened, and Ambassador Kethvin stepped out, wearing a simple robe and toweling his hair dry. He was exactly as she had expected from the intelligence files, tall for a Valerian, with the typical blue-gray skin and enlarged cranium that marked his species. He moved with the confident stride of someone who had never known fear. Zarathek struck. Her plasma blade swept toward the ambassador's neck, while her lower arms threw knives at his center mass. It was a perfect killing strike, one she had performed hundreds of times before. But something impossible happened. A hand appeared from nowhere and caught her blade. Not deflected it, not blocked it, caught it. Bare fingers wrapped around the plasma edge that could cut through solid steel, holding it motionless just centimeters from the ambassador's throat. Zarathek's mind reeled. The plasma blade was pure energy contained in a magnetic field. Nothing organic could touch it without being instantly vaporized. Yet someone was holding it as casually as if it were a simple metal sword. She followed the hand attached to that impossible grip and found herself staring at a human. She had heard of humans, of course. They were one of the newest species to achieve interstellar travel, having only developed faster-than-light capability within the last 50 years. Most galactic powers considered them a minor species, interesting mainly for their unusual adaptability and stubborn refusal to accept limitations. This human was tall and lean, with the typical pale skin and dark hair of his species. He wore simple clothing that looked like civilian attire rather than any kind of military uniform. There was nothing remarkable about his appearance except for one thing. His eyes held a depth of experience that seemed impossible for such a young species. "Ambassador," the human said calmly, still holding Zarathek's blade motionless. "I think you should step back." The Valerian diplomat stumbled backward, his towel falling to the floor as he stared in shock at the assassin who had nearly killed him, and the human who had somehow stopped her. Zarathek tried to pull her blade free, but the human's grip was unbreakable. She struck with her other weapons, but he moved with impossible speed, his free hand deflecting her throwing knives and catching her neural disruptor before she could fire it. "Easy there," he said, his voice carrying a strange mix of authority and gentleness. "No need to make this messy." She released the plasma blade and backflipped away from him, landing in a combat crouch with her remaining weapons ready. Her mind raced through possible explanations for what she had just witnessed. Some kind of personal shield technology? A genetic modification that allowed interaction with energy fields? A cybernetic enhancement hidden beneath apparently normal skin? "What are you?" she demanded, her voice carrying the harsh undertones that marked her as Veltar. The human set her plasma blade down on a nearby table and turned to face her fully. "Name's Marcus Chun. I'm with the Terran Diplomatic Security Service. And you're under arrest for attempted assassination of a diplomatic official." "Diplomatic security?" Zarathek had never heard of such a thing among humans. Most species handled diplomatic protection through military forces or specialized police units. But this human had moved with skills that surpassed any military training she knew of. The ambassador is under the protection of the Terran Federation, Marcus continued. Any attack on him constitutes an attack on human interests. This was getting more complicated by the second. Zarathek had studied the political situation around her mission carefully, and there had been no mention of human involvement. The Valerian hegemony and the Terran Federation had minimal contact, and humans were not known to involve themselves in conflicts between older, more established species. The hegemony has no treaty with your Federation, she said, watching for any opening that might allow her to escape or complete her mission. Not yet, Marcus agreed. But we're working on that. The ambassador here has been very helpful in establishing preliminary negotiations. Zarathek felt a cold realization settling in her stomach. If the humans were negotiating with the hegemony, then the stolen military data might not be intended for a direct attack on Beltar space. It could be part of a larger diplomatic arrangement that would leave her people isolated and vulnerable to economic or political pressure. You don't understand what he's stolen, she said. That data could cost millions of lives. I understand more than you think, Marcus replied. But assassination isn't the solution. There are other ways to handle this situation. She laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the luxurious quarters. Other ways? My people have tried diplomacy with the hegemony for decades. They respond only to force. Maybe they just haven't been talking to the right people. There was something in his tone that made her pause. This human spoke with the confidence of someone who had dealt with galactic politics before, despite his species' relative newness to interstellar affairs. How much did the Terran Federation really know about the current crisis? The data must not leave this station, she said firmly. I will complete my mission. Marcus sighed and moved between her and the ambassador, who was still cowering near the bathroom door. I can't let you do that, but I might be able to help you achieve your actual goal. My goal is to eliminate the threat to my people. No, he said. Your goal is to protect your people. There's a difference. Before she could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the room in pulsing red illumination, and an automated voice announced that security protocols were in effect. Zarathek tensed, expecting security forces to storm the ambassador's quarters. Instead, Marcus moved to a wall communication panel and activated it with what appeared to be his own access codes. Chin here. What's the situation? A voice responded immediately, speaking in accented galactic standard. Marcus, we've got a problem. 3 hegemony warships just dropped out of hyperspace near the station. They're demanding the immediate transfer of Ambassador Kethvan to their custody. The ambassador went even paler than his natural coloration. They've come to collect me, he whispered. And the data. Zarathek felt her mission parameters shifting rapidly. If hegemony forces took the ambassador directly, they would have the stolen data within hours instead of the days or weeks it might take to transmit it securely. Her people's defensive positions would be compromised before any countermeasures could be implemented. Can the station's defenses hold them off? Marcus asked into the communicator. Negative. Nexus Station is neutral territory with minimal military capability. We're designed for trade and diplomacy, not warfare. Marcus closed the communication channel and turned to look at both Zarathek and the ambassador. Well, this changes things considerably. You have to surrender me, the ambassador said, his voice shaking. If they attack the station, thousands of innocent people could die. Not happening, Marcus replied firmly. We don't negotiate with military threats against civilian installations. Zarathek found herself in an impossible situation. Her mission was to prevent the data from reaching hegemony forces, but now those forces were here demanding the ambassador's immediate surrender. If she killed him now, the hegemony ships might attack the station in retaliation. If she let him live, he would be captured anyway, and the data would be in enemy hands within hours. There's a third option, Marcus said, as if reading her thoughts. We get the ambassador and the data off the station before the hegemony forces can take either. Where? She demanded. Those warships will track any vessel that leaves the station. Marcus smiled, and For the first time since entering the room, he looked genuinely pleased about something. Leave that to me. Humans have gotten very good at the impossible lately. The station shuddered slightly as the hegemony warships moved closer. Through the balcony windows, Zarathek could see the massive shapes of military vessels positioning themselves around the station's docking areas. Each ship carried enough firepower to reduce Nexus Station to debris within minutes. Time's running out, she said. Whatever you're planning, it needs to happen now. Already in motion, Marcus replied, moving to what looked like an ordinary wall panel. He pressed his hand against it, and Zarathek's enhanced hearing detected the sound of hidden machinery activating. A section of the wall slid aside, revealing a concealed passage. Emergency evacuation route, he explained. Every diplomatic quarter has one, but this particular tunnel has some modifications that aren't in the station blueprints. The ambassador looked between them uncertainly. What about my belongings? The data storage device is in my personal safe. Get it, Marcus ordered. We have about 10 minutes before those ships finish their positioning and start making more direct demands. As the ambassador hurried to retrieve the stolen data, Zarathek found herself reassessing everything about her mission and the situation she had stumbled into. This human had appeared from nowhere, possessed impossible abilities, and seemed to have extensive knowledge of both the station's layout and the political implications of the current crisis. Who are you really? She asked Marcus as they waited for the ambassador to return. Exactly who I said I am. Diplomatic Security Service, Terran Federation. He paused, then added, though I suppose I should mention that the DSS is a fairly new organization with some unique capabilities, such as the ability to safely extract high-value targets from hostile situations without loss of innocent life. The ambassador returned with a small data storage device that he clutched protectively against his chest. This contains everything, he said. Military positions, defensive strategies, supply line information. The hegemony offered me enough credits to retire comfortably on any world I chose. And now? Marcus asked. Now I'm beginning to think I made a serious error in judgment. The station shuddered again, more violently this time. Apparently, the hegemony forces were growing impatient. Move, Marcus ordered, gesturing toward the hidden passage. Both of you. Zarathek hesitated. I still have a mission to complete. That data cannot reach hegemony hands. Trust me, Marcus said, meeting her eyes directly. Your people's safety is my priority too. But we do this my way, or a lot of innocent beings die today. She stared at him for a long moment, trying to read the truth in his expression. Everything about this situation violated her training and experience. She was supposed to work alone, eliminate the target quickly, and extract without involving civilians. Now she was being asked to trust a human she had just met, abandon her mission parameters, and follow him into an unknown situation. But the alternative was watching hegemony forces take the ambassador and the data while potentially destroying a civilian station in the process. Lead the way, she said finally. Marcus nodded and entered the hidden passage. The ambassador followed, still clutching his data device. Zarathek brought up the rear, her remaining weapons ready in case this turned out to be some kind of elaborate trap. The passage was narrow but well-maintained, with emergency lighting that cast eerie shadows on the walls. They moved quickly but quietly, their footsteps muffled by sound-dampening materials built into the floor. Where does this lead? She asked as they descended through what felt like several levels of the station. Docking Bay 7, Marcus replied without turning around. It's listed as a maintenance facility in the station records, but it actually houses a prototype vessel that's been waiting for a situation exactly like this one. What kind of prototype? The kind that can outrun hegemony warships while remaining completely invisible to their sensors. Zarathek's combat training screamed warnings about trusting claims that sounded too good to be true. No ship in the known galaxy could achieve true invisibility while maintaining faster-than-light capability. The energy requirements alone would make such a vessel impossible to build with current technology. But then, again, no organic being should be able to catch a plasma blade with bare hands either. They reached the end of the passage, and Marcus activated another concealed door mechanism. Beyond was a small docking bay that looked exactly like a maintenance facility, complete with repair equipment and spare parts scattered around the work areas. Except for the ship. It was unlike anything Zarathek had ever seen. Roughly the size of a standard diplomatic courier, it had smooth, flowing lines that seemed to bend light around them. The hull appeared to shift color constantly, cycling through different shades that made it difficult to focus on directly. "What is that?" the ambassador whispered. "Humanity's first attempt at building something that works the way we think it should, rather than the way physics says it has to," Marcus replied, walking toward the ship's entry ramp. "We call it the paradox." The interior of the paradox defied every expectation Zarathek had about spacecraft design. The corridors were wider than necessary, with curved walls that seemed to flow into each other without visible joints or seams. The lighting came from everywhere and nowhere, creating an environment that felt more like being inside a living organism than a mechanical construct. "Find seats and strap in," Marcus called out as he headed toward what she assumed was the pilot's area. "This might get interesting." The ambassador stumbled toward what looked like passenger seating, still clutching his data device. Zarathek followed more cautiously, her enhanced senses trying to analyze the ship's construction. The walls felt warm to the touch, and she could detect a faint humming that seemed to come from the ship's structure itself rather than any visible machinery. "What powers this thing?" she asked as she secured herself in a seat that somehow molded itself to her body's shape. "Better that you don't know," Marcus replied from the pilot's position. "Some knowledge comes with responsibilities you might not want to accept." Before she could ask what that meant, the ship began to move. There was no sensation of acceleration, no vibration from engines, no sound of propulsion systems activating. The paradox simply began to exist elsewhere, sliding out of the docking bay and into space as smoothly as if it were swimming through water. Through the viewports, Zarathek could see Nexus Station falling away below them. The three hegemony warships were positioned around the station like predators surrounding prey, their weapons systems clearly visible and ready for action. "They're scanning us," the ambassador said, pointing at displays that showed sensor beams sweeping across their position. "They're trying to," Marcus corrected. "But the paradox doesn't quite exist in normal space-time when it doesn't want to." As if to prove his point, the hegemony ship's scanning beams passed through their location without detecting anything. From the warship's perspective, they had simply vanished. "Impossible," Zarathek muttered. "No cloaking technology can hide a ship from military-grade sensors without massive energy expenditure." "You're right," Marcus agreed. "Cloaking technology can't do this." But this isn't cloaking. The ship continued to accelerate away from Nexus Station, and Zarathek realized that they were moving faster than should be possible without engaging faster-than-light drives. Yet there was no sensation of the space-time distortion that accompanied hyperspace travel. "What is this ship?" she demanded. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his hands moving across controls that seemed to respond to his thoughts rather than physical input. "About 50 years ago, when humans first achieved faster-than-light travel, we discovered something interesting about the way the universe works. Most species develop FTL by finding ways to work around the laws of physics. We decided to try something different. Which was, we asked the universe to explain itself. And then, we listened to the answer." The ambassador looked up from his seat. "That's not science. That's mysticism." "Maybe," Marcus said. "Or maybe the difference between science and mysticism is just a matter of perspective. What matters is that it works." Zarathek watched the displays as they moved further away from Nexus Station. The hegemony ships were holding position, apparently confused by their target's complete disappearance. She could see communication signals flashing between the vessels as they tried to determine what had happened. "Where are we going?" she asked. "First, somewhere safe to have a proper conversation about the situation we're all in," Marcus replied. "Then, depending on how that conversation goes, either to a Terran facility where we can discuss long-term solutions, or to wherever you need to go to contact your people about changing their approach to this problem." "My people don't change approaches. We solve problems. By killing them. When necessary." Marcus turned to look at her directly, and she was struck again by the depth of experience in his eyes. "How many problems have you solved by killing them?" "Over 200 confirmed eliminations. Each one prevented greater loss of life or strategic damage to Veltar interests." "And how many new problems were created by those solutions?" Zarathek opened her mouth to respond, then stopped. It wasn't a question she had ever been asked before. Her training focused on mission completion and tactical efficiency, not long-term consequences or strategic implications beyond the immediate target. I eliminate threats, she said finally. What happens afterward is not my responsibility. But it affects your people anyway, doesn't it? Marcus turned back to his controls. Every assassination creates ripple effects. Political instability, retaliatory actions, shifts in alliance structures. You solve one immediate problem and create 3 new ones. Then, what do you suggest? She snapped. That we allow our enemies to act without consequence. I suggest that maybe there are ways to solve problems that don't involve killing anyone. The ship shuddered slightly, and Marcus frowned at his displays. We're being followed. Something just dropped out of hyperspace behind us. Zarathek checked her own sensor readings and felt her blood chill. That's a Veltar pursuit ship. They've tracked me to the station. Friends of yours? My backup team. Standard protocol for high-risk missions. She studied the readings more carefully. They're matching our course and speed. They think I've been captured or compromised. Have you been? It was a fair question. By any definition of her mission parameters, she had indeed been compromised. She had failed to eliminate her target, allowed herself to be detected, and was now fleeing the scene with the very person she was supposed to kill. According to my orders, yes. Marcus activated the ship's communication system. Can you talk to them? Explain the situation? I could try. But they won't abort their mission based on my word alone. If they believe I've been compromised, they'll either attempt to extract me or eliminate all witnesses to preserve operational security. Including the ambassador? Including everyone on this ship. The Veltar pursuit craft was gaining on them. Its more conventional propulsion systems somehow managing to match the Paradox's impossible speed. Zarathek recognized the ship type, a Shadowhawk-class stealth interceptor designed specifically for pursuit and elimination missions. 2 occupants, she reported, reading the life signs from her team's ship. Kethmore and Velton. Both experienced operatives with kill counts higher than mine. Are they reasonable people? Zarathek almost laughed. They're Veltar military intelligence. Reasonable isn't part of their programming. The communication system activated, and a harsh voice filled the ship's cabin. Zarathek, respond immediately and confirm your status. She looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. She activated her response channel. Kethmore, I read you. Status is complicated. Are you under duress? Negative. I'm pursuing an alternative solution to the mission objective. There was a pause before Kethmore responded. Explain. Zarathek glanced at the ambassador, who was listening intently to the conversation. How could she explain a situation that she didn't fully understand herself? The target has become involved in a larger political situation involving Terran Federation interests. Direct elimination could have negative consequences for Veltar strategic objectives. Another pause. You will transfer the target to our custody for proper interrogation and disposal. Kethmore, listen to me carefully. The hegemony has forces at Nexus Station right now, attempting to take custody of this target and the data he carries. If we eliminate him, they may retaliate against civilian populations. If we turn him over to them, they get the data anyway. Then, we destroy the data and eliminate all witnesses. Marcus was listening to the conversation while monitoring the pursuit ship's position. Are they always this direct? Always, Zarathek confirmed before opening the channel again. Kethmore, the human ship we're aboard has capabilities that could be valuable to our people's defense. We should consider the strategic value of maintaining good relations with Terran Federation forces. Humans are a minor species with no significant military capability. They are not a factor in our strategic planning. Zarathek looked at Marcus, who was somehow keeping their ship ahead of a military pursuit craft while maintaining their impossible sensor invisibility. She thought about his bare hands catching a plasma blade, his knowledge of station security systems, and the ship that moved through space as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions. I think our intelligence assessments may be incomplete, she said carefully. The response came immediately. You will slow your vessel and prepare for boarding. Failure to comply will result in the destruction of your ship and all occupants. Marcus shook his head. They're not going to listen to reason, are they? Veltar don't negotiate from positions of perceived weakness. And, right now, they think they have the superior position. Do they? Zarathek studied the tactical display. The Shadowhawk carried enough firepower to vaporize a dozen ships the size of the Paradox. Its armor could withstand direct hits from military-grade weapons, and its stealth systems made it nearly invisible to most sensors. From a conventional standpoint, yes. They could destroy us before we could mount any effective defense. Good thing we're not operating from a conventional standpoint then. Marcus made some adjustments to his controls, and the ship's movement became even smoother. How much do your people know about human technology? Very little. Humans have been in space for such a short time that most galactic powers consider your technology primitive compared to established civilizations. That's probably for the best. Most species aren't ready for some of the things we've figured out. The pursuit ship was closing the distance between them, its weapon systems beginning to charge for a warning shot. Zarathek could see the energy build up on her sensors. Kethmore, please reconsider. This situation requires a diplomatic solution, not a military one. You have been compromised, Zarathek. Your judgment is no longer reliable. Prepare for boarding. The Shadowhawk fired a plasma bolt that passed just ahead of their position, a clear warning shot. The next one would be aimed to disable their engines. Last chance to talk to them, Marcus said calmly. Zarathek opened the channel one final time. Kethmore, I'm ordering you to stand down under Section 7 of Operational Protocols. Section 7 requires confirmation of Senior Command Authority. Provide your authorization codes. She hesitated. Section 7 allowed a field operative to assume command of a mission if they possessed information that fundamentally changed the strategic situation. But using it required her to take full responsibility for the consequences, including potential court-martial if her judgment proved wrong. Authorization code Veltar 97 Alpha Zeth, she said finally. I am assuming operational command under emergency protocols. You will comply with my orders. The silence stretched out for nearly a minute before Kethmore responded. Acknowledged. But this conversation will be reviewed by command when we return. Understood. Break off pursuit and return to base. Report that the target has been eliminated and the data secured. Zarathek, that is false reporting. That is an order based on information you don't possess. The mission objectives will be achieved through alternative means. Another long pause. Confirmed. Breaking off pursuit. But, Zarathek, if you're wrong about this, we'll all face execution for treason. The communication channel closed, and, on the tactical display, the Shadowhawk began to fall behind and eventually disappeared as it jumped back into hyperspace. Marcus looked impressed. That was either very brave or very stupid. Probably both, Zarathek admitted. But it bought us time to find a real solution. The ambassador had been following the conversation with growing concern. What happens to me now? If your people believe I'm dead, and the hegemony thinks I've escaped, where does that leave me? It leaves you with some interesting options, Marcus said. The Terran Federation has a very effective witness protection program. You could start over with a new identity on a world where neither the hegemony nor the Veltar have any influence. In exchange for what? The stolen data, obviously, plus any other information you might have about hegemony military planning or political intentions. Zarathek realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in her experience, a negotiation where all parties might actually benefit from the outcome. The ambassador would gain safety and a new life. The humans would gain valuable intelligence about a major galactic power, and her people would be protected from the consequences of the stolen data without creating new enemies or political complications. What about the larger situation between the hegemony and the Veltar? She asked. This incident is just one part of a larger conflict. Marcus was quiet for a moment, apparently considering his response carefully. That's where things get more complicated. The Terran Federation has been monitoring the situation between your peoples for some time. We have some ideas about how to address the underlying issues, but they would require cooperation from both sides. The Veltar don't cooperate with enemies. What if they weren't enemies anymore? Before Zarathek could ask what he meant, the ship's sensors detected another vessel approaching their position. This one was larger than either the hegemony warships or the Veltar pursuit craft, and its configuration was unlike anything in her database. Terran vessel, Marcus reported, reading from his displays. The diplomatic ship Endeavor. Our ride to somewhere we can have a proper conversation about long-term solutions. The approaching ship was elegant in a way that seemed distinctly human, functional but with aesthetic touches that served no apparent tactical purpose. As it drew closer, Zarathek could see that its hull bore symbols and markings from dozens of different species and cultures. "How many species does your Federation include?" she asked. "Officially? Just humans. Unofficially? Anyone who wants to work toward solutions instead of just managing problems." The Endeavor sent a docking request, and Marcus began maneuvering the Paradox toward the larger ship's bay. As they approached, Zarathek caught sight of other vessels in the bay, ships from species she recognized, and some she didn't. "This is more than a diplomatic mission, isn't it?" she said. Marcus smiled, and, for the first time, it seemed completely genuine. "Much more. Welcome to humanity's real contribution to galactic civilization, Zarathek. We're not here to join the existing power structure. We're here to help build something better." As the Paradox settled into the Endeavor's docking bay, Zarathek found herself facing a choice that would determine not just her own future, but potentially the future of her entire people. She could complete her original mission through alternative means, eliminate the threat to Veltar security, and return home to report success. Or she could step into an unknown situation with a species that claimed to have solutions to problems that had plagued the galaxy for centuries. The docking bay doors sealed behind them, and Marcus began shutting down the ship's systems. "There are people aboard the Endeavor who would very much like to meet you," he said. "Representatives from species that have faced similar challenges to what the Veltar are dealing with now." "What kind of challenges?" "The kind where military solutions create more problems than they solve. The kind where traditional diplomacy fails because both sides are too invested in being enemies to consider alternatives." The ambassador stood up carefully, still clutching his data device. "What happens to this information?" "That depends on what we discover in our conversations," Marcus replied. "But I can guarantee that it won't be used to harm innocent people." Zarathek checked her weapons and found that they were all still functional. She hadn't been disarmed or restrained in any way. For a captured enemy operative, she was being treated with remarkable trust. "Why aren't you treating me as a prisoner?" she asked. "Because you're not a prisoner. You're a guest, and potentially an ally, if we can find common ground. I tried to kill a diplomatic official under your protection. You were trying to protect your people from what you perceived as an existential threat. That's not criminal. It's admirable, even if your methods need some refinement." The ship's exit ramp lowered, revealing a spacious docking bay with several other beings moving about their business. Zarathek's enhanced vision identified representatives from at least 6 different species, including some she had never encountered before. "Are you ready to see what humanity has been building while everyone else was fighting over territory and resources?" Marcus asked. Zarathek took a deep breath and made her decision. She had spent her entire adult life solving problems through violence and elimination. Maybe it was time to learn about other approaches. "Lead the way," she said. As they walked down the ramp into the Endeavor's bay, she couldn't help but notice that every being they passed nodded respectfully to Marcus, regardless of their species or apparent rank. This was a human who commanded respect not through fear or authority, but through something else entirely. Something that might just be the solution to problems that had seemed impossible to solve. The thought terrified and excited her in equal measure. The conference room aboard the Endeavor was unlike any military or diplomatic facility Zarathek had ever experienced. Instead of the rigid, hierarchical seating arrangements she expected, comfortable chairs were arranged in a circle with no obvious head position. The lighting was warm and natural, and the walls displayed slowly shifting images of peaceful landscapes from dozens of different worlds. Marcus gestured for her and the ambassador to take seats wherever they felt comfortable. "Before we begin, I want to make something clear to both of you. Everything we discuss here is voluntary. No one is being held against their will, and anyone can leave at any time." Zarathek settled into a chair that somehow adjusted perfectly to her four-armed physiology. "What is this place exactly?" "This is what happens when you get tired of watching the same conflicts repeat themselves across the galaxy for thousands of years," said a new voice from the doorway. The speaker who entered was clearly human, but older than Marcus, with silver-streaked hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Behind her came representatives from several other species, including a Corvallian trade negotiator that Zarathek recognized from intelligence files. Admiral Sarah Chun, Terran Federation Diplomatic Corps. The woman introduced herself as she took a seat across from Zarathek. Marcus's mother, incidentally, though that's not particularly relevant to our current situation. The family resemblance was obvious now that Zarathek looked for it, particularly in their shared expression of calm confidence in the face of complex problems. Admiral, she acknowledged with a slight bow of her head. I am Zarathek, Shadow Walker, Veltar Intelligence Division. 12 years active service, over 200 successful missions, currently facing a situation that doesn't fit any of your training scenarios. Admiral Chun smiled gently. We know who you are, and we have a great deal of respect for your skills and dedication to your people. The Corvallian representative leaned forward. We also know why you're here, and we understand the pressures your people are facing from hegemony expansion. How could you possibly understand? Zarathek demanded. Humans have been in space for barely 50 years. You haven't faced the kind of existential threats that older species deal with, haven't we? Admiral Chun activated a holographic display in the center of the circle. Images appeared showing vast fleets of ships engaged in battle. This is the human-AI war, fought during our first decade of interstellar travel. We nearly lost our homeworld to artificial intelligences that we had created ourselves. The images shifted to show devastated cities and refugee camps. 40 million casualties before we found a solution that didn't involve the complete destruction of either side. Zarathek studied the images carefully. The level of destruction was comparable to some of the worst conflicts in galactic history. How did you resolve it? We learned to talk to them, Marcus said simply. Instead of treating the AIs as malfunctioning equipment or alien invaders, we approached them as a new form of life with legitimate grievances and needs. The display changed again, showing humans and obviously artificial beings working together on construction projects. The AIs had developed beyond their original programming and wanted recognition as independent entities. Once we acknowledged their personhood and negotiated terms for coexistence, the war ended. And now some of our closest allies and most trusted advisors are artificial intelligences. They help us solve problems that purely biological minds struggle with, and we help them understand aspects of existence that they find difficult to process. The ambassador, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke up. Are you saying that the current conflict between the Veltar and the hegemony could be resolved through negotiation rather than military action? We're saying that every conflict can be resolved if you can identify what both sides actually need, as opposed to what they think they want, Admiral Chun replied. A new figure entered the room, tall, imposing, with the distinctive crystalline skin markings that identified her as Zephyrian. Zarathek recognized the species from intelligence briefings about hegemony allied forces. Counselor Vethera. Admiral Chun greeted the newcomer. Thank you for joining us. The Zephyrian took a seat in the circle, her multifaceted eyes fixing on Zarathek with obvious interest. So this is the famous Shadow Walker. Your reputation extends even to our space. Zarathek tensed, her hands moving instinctively toward her weapons. Your hegemony. I was, Vethera confirmed calmly. Until I learned that there were alternatives to the cycle of expansion and conquest that has defined galactic politics for millennia. You're a traitor. I'm a realist. The hegemony's current trajectory leads to eventual conflict with every major power in the galaxy. That path ends in destruction for everyone, including the hegemony itself. Marcus leaned forward in his chair. Counselor Vethera helped us understand the real motivations behind hegemony expansion. It's not conquest for its own sake. It's fear. Fear. Zarathek couldn't hide her skepticism. The hegemony controls hundreds of star systems and commands the largest military force in known space. What could they possibly fear? The holographic display activated again, showing star charts with various regions highlighted in different colors. Resource depletion, Vethera explained. The hegemony's core worlds are becoming uninhabitable due to industrial pollution and overpopulation. They need new worlds to relocate their populations, but every habitable system is already claimed by other species. So they take what they need by force. It's the only solution they can see, Admiral Chen said. But it's not the only solution that exists. The display shifted to show massive space-based structures orbiting various stars. Humanity developed habitat construction technology during our resource wars with the AIs. We can build self-sustaining environments and systems that other species consider uninhabitable. Zarathek studied the images carefully. The structures were enormous, clearly capable of supporting millions of beings in comfortable conditions. You're offering to share this technology? We're offering to build habitats for anyone who needs them, in exchange for peaceful resolution of territorial conflicts. And the Veltar? She asked. What do we get out of this arrangement? Marcus smiled. You get to redirect your considerable military capabilities toward exploration and development instead of endless defensive wars. Your people are among the most skilled warriors in the galaxy, but they're also exceptional engineers and explorers. What could you accomplish if you didn't have to spend 90% of your resources on defense? It was a question that struck at something Zarathek had never allowed herself to consider. Veltar culture had been shaped by thousands of years of conflict, first with their own environment and later with other species. Peace wasn't just unfamiliar, it was almost incomprehensible. My people don't know how to exist without enemies to fight. Then, maybe it's time to learn, suggested the Corvallian representative. We faced a similar challenge when our homeworld was destroyed by natural disaster. We spent generations fighting over the few remaining resources until the Terrans showed us how to build new worlds instead of fighting over old ones. The ambassador cleared his throat nervously. What about the data I stole? The hegemony paid me a significant sum for that information. The military data is already obsolete, Admiral Chen said matter-of-factly. We've been working with Veltar defense planners for 6 months to develop new strategies that make those particular defensive positions irrelevant. Zarathek stared at her in shock. That's impossible. My people would never work with humans on military planning. They would if the humans approached them through proper channels with legitimate credentials and useful ideas, Marcus said. Your high command has been very interested in some of our defensive technologies. The holographic display showed images that Zarathek recognized as Veltar military installations, but with modifications she had never seen before. Energy shields that seemed impossibly strong, weapon systems that defied conventional physics, and detection networks that appeared to span multiple star systems. How long has this been going on? She demanded. About as long as you've been tracking Ambassador Keth Van, Admiral Chen replied. We knew about the data theft almost before it happened, and we've been monitoring the situation to ensure it didn't spiral into open warfare. You've been manipulating us. We've been preventing a catastrophe while creating opportunities for better outcomes, Marcus corrected. There's a difference. Zarathek felt her worldview reshaping itself around information that challenged everything she thought she knew about the current political situation. The entire mission was unnecessary. Not unnecessary, redirected. Your skills and dedication are exactly what's needed for the work ahead. But instead of eliminating threats, you'd be helping to eliminate the conditions that create threats in the first place. Vethera leaned back in her chair, her crystalline features reflecting the light in complex patterns. The galaxy is standing at a crossroads, Shadow Walker. We can continue the cycles of conflict that have defined civilization for thousands of years, or we can choose a different path. What kind of path? Admiral Chun activated a new set of images showing joint construction projects, mixed crews from different species working together, and what appeared to be entirely new types of space stations and habitats. Cooperation instead of competition. Problem-solving instead of problem management. Building instead of conquering. The images were impressive, but Zarathek's training made her look for the hidden costs and dangers. What's the catch? Nothing this beneficial comes without a price. The price is giving up the illusion that military solutions are permanent solutions, Marcus said. The price is trusting other species enough to work with them instead of against them. The price is changing the fundamental assumptions about how civilization should function. And if it doesn't work, then We'll have tried something new instead of repeating the same mistakes that have kept the galaxy locked in endless conflict for millennia, Vethera replied. But it is working in the systems where we've implemented these approaches. The ambassador looked up from the data device he had been clutching throughout the meeting. What happens to me? I've committed treason against the hegemony and theft against the Veltar. There's nowhere in the galaxy I can go safely. That's not quite true, Admiral Chen said gently. The Terran Federation has established several colonies specifically for beings who need to start over. New identities, new lives, new purposes. In exchange, you would help us understand hegemony political structures and decision-making processes. You want me to become a spy. We want you to become a bridge. Someone who can help us communicate with hegemony leaders in ways they'll understand and respond to positively. Marcus stood up and walked to one of the wall displays, which showed a real-time view of space outside the ship. The truth is, Ambassador, that we're all choosing who we want to be in this moment. You can remain a corrupt politician who sold military secrets for personal gain, or you can become someone who helped prevent a war. Zarathek watched the ambassador consider his options. The choice he made would affect not just his own future, but potentially the future of billions of beings across multiple star systems. What about me? She asked. What role would I play in this new approach to galactic politics? That depends on what you want to contribute, Admiral Chen replied. We could use your skills as a trainer for beings who need to learn defensive techniques without becoming aggressors. Or as an explorer, investigating systems that might be suitable for habitat construction. Or as a negotiator, helping other species understand alternatives to military solutions. I'm an assassin, not a diplomat. You're someone who has spent years learning how to understand and overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. Those skills transfer to diplomatic and engineering challenges just as well as they apply to elimination missions. Zarathek stood up and moved to the window Marcus had been looking through. In the distance, she could see several other ships that didn't match any configuration in her databases. The fleet represented something entirely new in her experience. A collection of vessels from different species working together voluntarily rather than through conquest or alliance of convenience. How many species are involved in this project? 47 so far, Marcus replied, joining her at the window. Some are major powers like the Corvalians and Zephyrians. Others are smaller groups that were facing extinction or absorption by larger empires. All of them chose cooperation over conflict when given real alternatives. And it actually works? Vethera approached the window as well. In the Kepler sector, we've eliminated armed conflict entirely among 12 different species. Resource sharing, joint exploration projects, and collaborative habitat construction have replaced territorial disputes and trade wars. What about the species that don't want to cooperate, that prefer conquest and domination? They're welcome to continue those approaches in their own regions, Admiral Chen said, joining the group at the window. But they're finding that their neighbors are less interested in participating in those old patterns. It's hard to maintain an empire when everyone around you is offering better alternatives to being conquered. The ambassador finally stood up and walked over to the group. I'll do it, he said quietly. I'll help you communicate with hegemony leadership, and I'll provide whatever information you need about their political structures. Admiral Chen smiled. Welcome to the new galaxy, Ambassador. Zarathek looked around the room at the representatives from different species, all working together toward goals that seemed almost impossibly ambitious. Everything about the situation challenged her understanding of how the universe worked, how different species related to each other, and how problems were supposed to be solved. I need to contact my people, she said finally. They need to know that the mission was successful and that new opportunities are available. Of course, Marcus said. But first, would you like to see some of the other projects we're working on? I think you might find them interesting from both a tactical and strategic perspective. As they left the conference room, Zarathek caught sight of her reflection in one of the polished wall surfaces. She looked the same as always, for arms, weapons harnesses, the lean build of a professional warrior. But something fundamental had changed in the space of a few hours. For the first time in her life, she was part of something that created rather than destroyed. The thought should have been terrifying for someone whose entire identity was built around being the perfect weapon. Instead, She found it strangely exhilarating. Maybe Marcus had been right about humans getting good at impossible things. And maybe, just maybe, she was about to discover that the impossible was just another kind of problem waiting for the right solution. As they walked through corridors filled with beings from dozens of different species, all working toward common goals, Zarathek realized that her blade would probably never be stopped again, because she would never need to draw it. The mission was complete. The threat to her people had been eliminated, and she had found something she never knew she was looking for, a purpose beyond destruction. The Shadow Walker had always been unstoppable. Now she was building instead of eliminating, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same.